This is our second attempt at brewing the world's lightest lager. Will we screw it up again and make what looks to be an entire keg of bull's milk? Or will we bang out a certified crispy boy, just like this? Speaking of, if you watch at least 5 minutes of this video, you're certified to be not as ADHD as you thought you were. If you click off before that, TikTok may have cooked your brain. And if you make it to the end of the video, I'm going to share with you one of my top tips from the brand new best dish selling demotivational book written by yours truly, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective, Extremely Lazy People Homebrew Edition. Making beer is actually very easy. It's accomplished in 3 steps. Number 1, turn starch into sugar. Number 2, boil and add hops. Number 3, turn the hoppy sugar water into alcohol. For the most part, the primary ingredient in beer is malted barley. But the secret to making really light beer is rice. However, there's actually a big problem packing a ton of rice into a beer recipe, making it an absolute nightmare to work with, which I will get to in a moment. But before that, let's just get the rice cooking. This part's fairly straightforward. We're gonna be cooking 7 pounds of jasmine rice for this recipe, which I'm gonna cook right in my 10.5 gallon 120 volt Clawhammer brewing system, available by the way on clawhammersupply.com, currently on sale for 0% off, but supplies are limited. Once they're gone, so act fast. And by the way, you are watching Clawhammer Supply. I'm Kyle, this is Emmett, this is Libby. We make beer and we are gonna be live streaming every brew day in 2025, so make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss a single disaster unfolding in real time. All right, so I did skip a step. We're gonna need 7.5 gallons of water for the beer. So I went ahead and added the entire 7.5 gallons of water before I added the rice. And then I set the brew system controller to a boil. We're not serving this to anybody. It doesn't need to be nice and fluffy or whatever normal rice needs to be. We just need it to be cooked. So I'm just adding the water, I'm adding the rice. I set the controller to a boil. Once it hits a boil, I'm gonna let it boil for probably 45 minutes or until the rice is done, and that's that. So we'll get back to the brew day here in a second, but why are we using rice to begin with? Well, rice is ideal for making super light beer because it won't add color to the beer. It doesn't add a ton of body to the beer. It makes for a nice, crisp, clean, neutral flavor profile, and all of the lightest American lagers, as well as many of the very light lagers around the world, use a fair amount of rice. So if we're going to make the lightest lager in the world, we're going to need a lot of rice. That's why we're using 7 entire pounds of it. Another ingredient we're going to need is malted barley. Malted barley is the primary ingredient in almost every beer recipe on the planet. Of course, there are exceptions, but malted barley is very common. And you might ask, if rice makes very light beer and we're trying to make the lightest beer in the world, why wouldn't we just use 100% rice? Remember, I said the first step to making beer is actually turning starch into sugar. Rice is primarily starch, the malted barley is primarily starch, but the barley also contains enzymes that turn starch into sugar. So we do need the malted barley. That is, unless we're just gonna like food science the crap out of this thing using packaged enzymes, which keep watching, we're gonna do a little bit of that as well. After the rice is done cooking, you'll need to leave it sit and cool until it's somewhere under 150 degrees Fahrenheit, which is actually about how far ours cool down after leaving it sit overnight. For the starch conversion to happen, which is called the mash, we're gonna heat it back up to 157 degrees using our brewing controller. While it's heating back up, what we're gonna do is crush 3 pounds of malted barley in our Clawhammer grain mill. We prefer super tight sitting on the mill, and sometimes we even double crush the grain. We do this because you get better efficiency, and our brew system is set up to handle a really fine crush, so we do it. Once we were done with that, we just started mixing the barley into the rice. This is where you really start to see the magic happen, but not before it looks like you potentially may have made a huge mistake. You'll notice that at first it's very thick and extremely clumpy, but if all goes to plan, the enzymes in the barley are going to start breaking the rice starch down, and it will start to thin out almost immediately. Here's how you avoid an absolute nightmare scenario when completing this process. Number 1, make sure to use enough barley. Our recipe is 70% rice, rice and 30% malted barley. I wouldn't recommend adding any more rice or less barley than this. You're gonna risk at that point, if you do, not having enough enzymes to break the rice all the way down, then it's gonna remain really thick and clumpy and not wanna drain through the basket at all. So remember, I said we've done this before. This is our second attempt. That was the mistake we made the first time. We didn't think about the fact we needed a certain amount of enzymes for the rice to break down. The second thing you're gonna wanna avoid doing is running your pump dry, exposing your heating element, and scorching your mash, which, trust me, you don't want to do that. We only barely avoided doing this on this brew day. We never really have any problem with the stuck mash is what it's called, but we did have that issue on this one. So you just want to pay very, very close attention, maybe even not circulate on this one, maybe just stir numerous times. Okay, this next step is optional. If you want to be a super pro, you can check the pH and then adjust the pH of your mash. Ideally, the pH will be somewhere around 5.2. However, you have to be careful because you can make things better, you can also make things worse. Pro tip, you can always add more lactic acid, but you can never add less. Unfortunately, I overshot the pH by quite a bit. We landed at 4.6, which isn't ideal, but no worries. Believe it or not, we've done that before and the beer turned out fine. You might be tempted to put some of this acid on your tongue and
trip out into fantasy land for a while, but
don't do this. Not only is this not that kind of acid, it will burn all of your taste buds off, so please don't do that. Another very optional step is adding some packaged enzymes, which we technically didn't need to do. At least we thought we didn't need to do that, but we had some in our refrigerator which was only slightly expired and figured, yeah, why not just use them? This stuff is called Ultra Firm by White Labs. Again, totally optional. So once you have the rice and the barley combined in the kettle, you're gonna leave them steep for 60 minutes, which means you'll have some time to kill. The smart thing to do would be to get your fermenter sanitized, which we did not do. What we did do actually was start drinking beer. Emmett looked up some weird stuff on his phone and we talked with the chat for a while, answered some questions, just shot the shit. It was really fun. Listen, we are very, very bad at planning things and keeping on any sort of dependable schedule. So if you want to watch one of the live streams, please subscribe and choose to be notified so when we do begin a live stream, your phone gets pinged. Okay, once the 60-minute mash is complete, elevate your basket above the brewing kettle and give it a good stir. You're gonna wanna get as much liquid out of this and through the basket screen as possible, so kind of scrape it, push it down a little bit. Again, this is not something we generally have to do, it's just the rice, it's weird. After it's had a little bit to drain, probably gonna have to leave it sit a little bit longer to drain. Once that's done, just remove the basket off of the kettle, take it out back, and just leave it for your coworker to deal with later. Okay, following that, set your controller to a boil. It will take a minute to reach boil temperature, so you'll have some more time to kill. I'd suggest getting your fermenter sanitized and getting it ready to go for the end of the brew day because you're going to need it shortly. Or you could just do what we did and you could drink some more beer. And don't forget to eat. As per usual, we're having tacos. Once a boil is reached, it's time to add the hops. This is a very simple recipe from a hop perspective and only calls for 1 ounce of crystal hops that you will toss in right at the very beginning of the boil. So make sure to have that ready. And if you were like us and had just been drinking thus far for the brew day, now is the time where you're gonna have to focus and at least get the chiller ready. I am a home improvement ninja and installed a hose bib in my kitchen, which is optional, but if you want to brew beer inside, it's actually super handy. But the downside there is that if your hose leaks, it's gonna leak inside your house. So mine started leaking, but I did a little bit of this, I did a little bit of that, and bing, bang, boom, we're back in business. Okay, once the 60-minute boil is finished, technically you would want to chill the beer down to 70 degrees, transfer it to a fermenter, and then pitch your lager yeast. However, as I mentioned, we did 0% of the prep work for using an actual fermenter for this brew day because instead of getting our fermenter cleaned and sanitized, we drank beer and ate tacos. So we cut the corner of all corners in brewing and we decided to ferment this beer right in the kettle, which is probably the worst beer to try this for, but we did it anyway. In theory, the kettle is sanitized because it's had boiling liquid in it for an hour. However you decide to ferment your beer, you're going to need to add some yeast. Pretty much any lager yeast will do. I will say that what we wanted to use was 3470, which is a nice warm temp lager yeast. We tried to get that at the homebrew shop. They were out. Instead, they gave us something they said was an adequate substitute. So without thinking about it, we just cracked the yeast package open and sprinkled it right into the chilled wort. Then we noticed a very peculiar smell, which was actually the yeast. At first I was like, do I kind of like this smell? But then somebody pointed out that it smells unmistakably like toe jam. At which point, I started to question what is actually wrong with me. But anyway, we had already added it to the kettle, so no turning back now. Our only option at this point was just to seal the kettle, which we did, ironically, with spunding valves. This is not typically how beer is fermented. You're probably not going to see this on any other brewing channel. But have any of the other channels out there written a best-selling book titled The 7 Habits of Highly Effective and Extremely Lazy People? No, they haven't. I wrote that book. That's why you're gonna see us doing that here. We let the beer ferment for a week. We cracked the fermenter open. We found a very weird looking beer. It was very clear on top and extremely cloudy on the bottom, which is presumably from the rice. All that's left to do now is chill it, carbonate it, leave it sit for a few days, and then, oh crap. Shit. I accidentally blasted the bottom of the keg with carbon dioxide because I hooked the hoses up wrong. Guys, I just screwed up. And instead of the beer being crystal clear like I thought it was going to be, it now looks like we've poured 3 glasses of bull's milk. But you know what, the show must go on, so we proceeded with the tasting as scheduled. I'll let it speak for itself, but after that I'll show you what the beer looked like once it resettled.
This is the worst looking beer we've ever made.
I blame you.
I blame myself too, because this is my fault. Like, we had some clear beer.
Yeah.
A lot of it.
Yesterday. But anyway, have you guys tasted it?
I have.
Oh, you have?
Libby has. Oh, cheating. Despite the fact that it looks god awful, I rather enjoy it. I like it. It's kind of citrusy. It's very drying on your tongue.
Yeah, it's definitely drying.
Yeah.
It tastes like a seltzer to me.
It does taste a bit. It's really nice.
It's just clean.
I've never had a seltzer that I liked.
I don't really like seltzer
ever,
either. Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
This, I like. I like this. This is great.
Yeah, it's like in between a seltzer and a beer, like a light beer.
This is what a lazy brew day should be. Ferment in the kettle.
Yeah.
Leave it sit for a week and then just transfer it to a keg. It looks like garbage, but that'll clear up.
Yeah. 0 off flavors.
No.
Super clean.
It just tastes like a light beer.
Dude. Yeah, it's great.
Oh my goodness, look at this. You can see my face through the beer. That's what you call a light lager. The lightest in the world, the lightest that we've ever brewed. And what does it taste like? Just super light, super crisp, super clean, a little bit of sulfur, tiny bit of sweetness, nice and refreshing, exactly as we intended it to be. And I'm stunned by how clean it is, considering we fermented this in the brew kettle. We didn't even transfer it over to a fermenter. Sometimes being lazy pays off. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one.